Anyways, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to share this story with you today. And while we can't guarantee it, we're pretty sure you will walk away with some things to try. So, the webinar we're doing today, Serious Results, Surprisingly Fun. Hopefully, that title is what hooked you, and the content will keep you here. Playbook for KPI-Driven digital transformation. This is a case study webinar of sorts. And we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. Who am I and why am I qualified to talk to you about this for the next 50 minutes? I'll start. I'm Jill Farley. I'm a senior strategist and agile coach at Palantir.net. We are a consultancy that works with mostly public sector, higher ed, and healthcare clients. Historically, we've worked in the open source technology space, specifically Drupal, but I'm hoping you'll see in this presentation today that we're a group of people with really deep expertise in just how to navigate complex situations, business challenges, and anything else that comes along with transformation. And for me, people-centered work is a particular passion of mine. So that's why I'm excited to share this story today. And I'm really grateful to be joined by my co-host today, with whom I worked closely on the project. And I'm going to go ahead and let Robbie introduce herself.
Yeah, hello. My name's Robbie Fuller. I'm the ADR Program Manager for the state of Wisconsin, Bureau of Aging and Disability Resources. At Bader, we work with all ADRCs, tribal partner agencies, aging and independent living resources throughout the state of Wisconsin and supporting them with policy, process, and tools to help serve all of our customers throughout. So thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Robbie. Let me go ahead and advance. So a few logistics. This is a live stream, so we are thrilled to have you join us, but apparently not enough to let you say things out loud. So basically, we'll be essentially presenting, and we'll be taking any questions through the Q&A tool. So it should be at the bottom of the screen. And if you have a question or comment at any time during this conversation, please click on that, and we'll leave some space for those questions. One of the co-hosts as well, Daniel, one of our colleagues, will actually be sort of manning that and feeding those to us. So hopefully this will spark lots of questions for you. So we're going to just start off with a little interactivity. Let's get warmed up and get you all in sort of the mindset. We're going to do a quick silent poll. So no fun bar graphs or anything. This is just a poll for your brain. Think to yourself, when was the last time you loved a project and nailed the goals? Just reflect for a moment and think about the last time you feel like that was the case for you. Okay. Next one. When was the last time you couldn't wait to meet with your team? When was the last time you were confident you'd meet your targets on a project, an initiative, anything? And final reflection question, when was the last time you were excited to share the results of your work with stakeholders? All right, we're diving right in. So with that poll, we either encouraged some blissful reminiscing about wonderful times, or we triggered panic and trauma. Both are valid. We've all felt all of those things, but apologies if we dredged some of that up. We're going to talk a lot about our experience on this project related to some of these questions. So what to expect from our time today? If I'm being honest, I wanted to personally have this conversation and share out this story because it feels like we all need a little joy right now. And this project brought a surprising amount of joy to the folks who worked on it. 20 plus people at Palantir had the pleasure of partnering with Bader, the team that Robbie represents at the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. And while we had some challenges, essentially there was just this thread of joy on the project. So ultimately, this session is about how measurable success and meaningful collaboration and enjoying the work don't have to be mutually exclusive. So today, we hope you'll learn why finding joy in your work is actually better statistically for your project outcome, how our project focused on both the people and the numbers, how to strengthen your team's culture and psychological safety. And if that term is new to you, we will explain it in just a little bit. And then how to thread success metrics from the project start to the finish, which is all part of this kind of recipe of overall success. So let's lay down a little bit of background on this project we keep talking about, and how we all came together to do this work. As I mentioned, a majority of the people at our organization at Palantir.net had the pleasure of working with the folks on Robbie's team at one time or another. And so I would love it, Robbie, if you could kind of talk about your organization's aims for this project, and the work that we sought out to do. So I'm going to pass it to you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So our organization was really wanting to be able to create a robust one-stop place to search for resources and information in the state of Wisconsin, specifically for the aging and disabled population, along with their caregivers. The system needed to be easily searchable for clients that are aged and or disabled, and also have a mechanism for them to be able to print off all those resources that they were wanting. So we wanted it to be very user-friendly in that customer experience.
Great. And I can jump in on this a little bit just with some more of kind of the logistics or nuts and bolts. From more of a technology perspective or a structural perspective, our challenge was digitizing thousands of these resources on one modern Drupal platform. So currently, the larger organization, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, we also work with them to manage their public website, which is built on Drupal. We were essentially folding all of this work, all of these resources to be displayed on that public website. And we had about 2 years to do this with time limited ARPA funds. So we really did have a kind of a once in a generation opportunity to do this work in this time with these this funding. So really, the long and short of it was there was a lot of these are just representative of the specific ADRCs within the counties. They all had their own spaces where they shared these resources, and our goal was to really create one unified database and accessible web experience. Robbie, was there anything you wanted to add about the context of the project before we dive right in?
Yeah, I think just noting that like our philosophy with the ADRCs is really to have the same service no matter where you go in the state of Wisconsin. And prior to having one resource directory, each ADRC was tasked with having their own. So what that resulted in, like Jill had stated, there are 59 ADRCs serving 72 counties. So 59 different resource directories managed very differently. And by putting that into one platform, we were able to have one unified system that would have a better customer experience with sameness throughout the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you. And I think it goes without saying the benefit of starting with this type of project is that it's work that really matters. And so that was a foundational draw for us to work with this fine group of folks over at DHS. This was really, really meaningful work. So luckily we did start off with that as kind of a, a benefit. But we're really going to today talk about what we did with that that opportunity and really turn this into not just a great opportunity to do something for the folks of Wisconsin, but really to make it a rewarding experience for everyone who worked on it. So before we talk about the specifics of how we approached it day to day, kind of wanted to just do a reality check with everyone about our conditions. So we know it's easier for a team to succeed if they have everything that they need. And it always drives me crazy when I go to a conference and you hear this wonderful story about a project that happened and everyone was happy. It was an amazing success. And then you find out that really they had ultimate flexibility. They had unlimited funds. They had total organizational buy-in. And so we just wanted to be really transparent about what our conditions were. We had some of those things, but our goal is to talk about the things that were possible regardless of the conditions. So just for transparency, we had a lot of positive conditions. We had a sizable budget, a fairly roomy timeline, but also considering the fact that we were working within a government organization with federal funds, roomy timelines and sizable budgets are all relative when there's a lot of sort of policies and procedures that need to be considered while you work on a project this huge. We were lucky to work with passionate clients who care so much about what they do. And we did have access to folks who would actually be using this tool. So that really enabled us to have those kinds of conversations directly with the people this would be affecting. Some of the things that did constrain us, we had an immovable launch date for the project. We really weren't able to move that any further. So if anything went wrong, we had any challenges, that was just something that wasn't possible. We couldn't move the date of getting this out there in the world. We really didn't have post-launch support budget, so we're building this giant thing, and it was really the whole concept was that we need to hand this off to DHS and allow them to manage it ongoing. So going from a large team of 20 plus people down to Robbie and a few of the folks that help her was a pretty big constraint. So we had to consider that the whole time. And obviously what comes with sort of working within a governmental organization, there are layers of stakeholders that we needed to consider the whole time. So we just wanted you to be aware of the context of the project and what we were working within. Okay, let's get back to the core purpose of this conversation today. Remember back to that poll question when we said, when was the last time you loved a project and you nailed the goals? Nailing goals is a complicated but achievable quest. Many of us sort of set goals, whether a project or personal life, and we work toward doing that every day. Loving your personal experience on a project or within an initiative, that's a little more in the complex domain. How do you achieve that? What does loving your experience or enjoying your experience really look like? What does that success look like? So I want to do a quick check-in with Robbie and thought we could talk just in a sentence or two for each of us. What did it feel like to work on this ADRC project? I can start. If I am just kind of characterizing my personal experience of the project, I didn't dread it. I was excited to work on it every day. I knew we were all coming to every meeting with the right attitude. We knew where we were going. We were excited to share what we did. Everyone on the team really kind of aligned on the purpose and felt good about the work that we were doing. And the folks we were working with over at DHS were curious. They asked questions. They cared about the answers. So what did it feel like? It felt like I was engaged and I was excited to do the work. And that's completely outside of the success around like what we were churning out, what we were coding, what we were designing. That was really just my experience of just being with these people on this project. Robbie, do you want to share a little bit about kind of in a nutshell what it felt like to work on this project?
Sure. Yeah, for me it was enjoyable. It was very person-centered, um, people-oriented. It was easy for us to understand techie jargon that in our human services field sometimes we're not always so attuned to. And it was nice to be listened to and for them to move with us because there were a lot of moving targets and questions, and they were very flexible. So it was very enjoyable.
Thank you. So we both shared our personal experience of working on the project. And I think while it's hard to nail down what, what we seek when we think about sort of that personal experience success, we have a hypothesis about what the recipe was for having success on this project in both kind of the business sense and the people sense. It's not just about the business outcomes. It's not just about liking the people on your team. What we're saying is the best kind of success happens when you have kind of an equal amount of focus on personal experience and outcomes. And in fact, you can do both. And that's what we're here to share with you today. That in fact, research shows that building connection in the team, having a more enjoyable, positive experience on work, it actually leads to overall success more often. So we're going to start a little bit with the people side, talking about this idea of team psychological safety, a positive people experience, and then we'll move into the other side, the business side. How did we achieve those measurable goals? So let's start with the people side. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some research first, and then we'll dive into our own experience of this. But if the term psychological safety is unfamiliar to you, it was coined in the late 90s by Amy Edmondson, who's a professor of leadership and management at the Harvard Business School. So psychological safety, if you don't know much about it, we're going to talk a lot about it today. Research from Google's multi-year project Aristotle, if you've heard of that, it's a fascinating project. I would highly recommend going down that rabbit hole someday. Found that psychological safety, more than any other factor, predicted a team's success. So they looked at lots of other aspects, things like resources and expertise, and psychological safety on a team was the number one factor that predicted their success. So what is psychological safety? In a nutshell, it's sort of a state where team members feel comfortable sharing ideas, asking questions of one another, and making mistakes. That's probably one of the biggest ones. Making mistakes without fear of judgment or punishment. So there's a couple of, there's other ways to characterize psychological safety, but at its core, it's really about team members working together, being okay to fail together, and really just sort of being willing to explore, try things out, and supporting each other along the way. So how did we build this on this team? How did we achieve a general sense of psychological safety? We've got a couple of examples of what the day-to-day experience of our team was. And Robbie, I'll probably just invite you to pop in with some examples from your perspective as we talk. But if we sum this up, essentially we sought to create a team culture. There was a large team, people from all different backgrounds. And the way that we did this, it wasn't really about chasing shiny features. It was really about building alignment across all these diverse folks on the team. We focused on clarity, creating connection, co-creation opportunities, and reflection. So all of these things kind of came together to create this team culture that fostered psychological safety and allowed us to really work successfully together. So we'll talk about the first one, clarity. What does that mean? Think about if you're sitting silently wondering what some jargon means in a room. Maybe it's in this presentation today. There's a 90% chance, I made that number up, but there's a large chance someone else in the room feels the same way. So thinking about our users, the people that we were interacting with on this project, and us coming from a technical side of things, we never wanted to make anyone on our client's team feel like they were that person sitting silently wondering what something means. We committed to plain language, trying to purge jargon from the way that we communicated. We were relentless about seeking full team understanding. So if we brought up a new concept, or we talked about something like an API integration or regressions, all words that probably mean a lot to technical folks. What did those things mean, and what kind of impact did they have on the folks on the client side? We really fostered this space where everyone was encouraged to ask for what they needed. So whether that was support, whether that was more explanation, whether that was, hey, I need to be able to communicate this out to other people. Can you say this in a different way? Can you give me some, visuals or a metaphor or something so that I can really use this information? We really encouraged everybody to sort of step up, whether on our team or the client's team, and ask for what they needed in order to be successful. And finally, we did a lot of modeling of behavior. So, instead of just telling everyone we all need to be accountable for our work, we would model that. Our team especially would say, hey, I'm going to take this work on and I intend to share something with you by X date. And then if that didn't happen, stepping up and really talking about why something got in the way. We also had group and system ways of doing that through check-ins, and we practiced Scrum, which is a way of sort of surfacing that information regularly through meetings. But yeah, we modeled this behavior and it kind of just caught on. So things like asking questions regularly, slowing down so that everybody could come along. That's how we sought to gain clarity. Robbie, do you have any additional examples of how, you experienced us trying to help everyone have the same clarity and understanding of the work?
Yeah, I think you hit most of them, but just kind of reiterating, it was easy to work with because of using the plain language. I think in professional industries, even on our side, it was good modeling behavior for us as well to not use our acronyms and terminology in order to understand that whole big picture and what we're trying to accomplish. And so for me specifically, using examples and walking us through step by step, it was nice for me to just spitball and say, this is what I want it to do. You tell me if there's a way to do it or not. and and you were able to do that in a way that I could understand, as well as being able to give me things that at the end of the project, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but those checklists and tools to be able to use to just simply go in um, and correct things that need to be done. So yeah, it was super helpful.
Thank you. Let's move on to a couple of the other aspects of how we created or sought to nurture the culture. So the second was connection. This is an AI fail. I found this quote and I don't remember, or I couldn't find who to attribute to, but people do better work when they're allowed to be people. That really hit when I read that. But it may seem simple, this idea of connection, but it isn't always natural in today's workplace, especially in heavily hierarchical or compliance focused environments. People are often conditioned to sort of get everything right, get right to the work. Spending time on connection could be seen as sort of like wasting time. But as we've alluded to, research shows otherwise. Research shows that the more you really establish this, the better folks can get down to business. Um, we but we do have examples where this is harder. You know, I'm not speaking about this project in particular. This one, it went really well. We do have other clients, government clients, who have gone so far as to say that certain of these tactics that we've used to establish connection were just not allowed in the project. So, you know, it is what it is. There's other ways to establish it. But the way that we did it on this project was one of the activities that we always valued was this idea of meeting check-ins. So when everyone assembles in a meeting together, they've probably been in a million different places. Their brain could have been in a totally different space. And this allows everyone in a very brief amount of time to kind of come together and say, where am I right now? Before we dive right into business. Just be humans together. It could be checking questions ranged from, what are you most looking forward to this week? To what was the name of your first pet, to draw your best pumpkin, which I shared over here. It just gives a little bit of that coming together before we move on. Another one or two of the ways that we did this were just really having fun on purpose. So Patrick, who I think is here today, he may not be, but he was our product owner on this project. And he would always have a surprise slide at the beginning of our sprint reviews, which is when we would share out an incremental bit of work of what weird holiday is it today? Which, you know, it's kind of disarming. We're getting ready to start a large meeting and share out the work that we've done. There's a little bit of pressure, and it was wonderful. It was this way for everyone to just sort of bond over the silliness of it. I bet you didn't know, for instance, that January 9th is Marzipan Day. Anyways, how could we not bond over that weirdness? You know, we had other ways of doing this, celebrating small wins, you know, not waiting until the whole thing is finished to really celebrate the work of each other. And Robbie, I'm curious if you could share a little bit about your experience of this. I know it's not really conventional with some other teams.
Yeah, it's interesting because this method really is important to our team. So we're a little bit different in our space at the state with Bader. We are all about human connection and serving our clients, and our leadership lives that as well in our workspaces. So we are often allowed to have that human space and be people. So it was refreshing on this side that now we're partnering with another agency that's also game to go ahead and do that as well, because it does create such a wonderful working environment when you do get connected to individuals and you learn a lot about each other. And just like you said, that check-in at the beginning of where your headspace is super important because everyone has a bad day. And so if you're able to just recognize that but move forward as to why maybe you're a little bit more quiet that day, or just need to have that time, you're okay to be able to do that. So yeah.
All right, we've got about 25 minutes left, so I'm going to breeze through the next couple so that we can kind of start to get to some things that you can do with all these experiences we're sharing. So the next one is co-creation. Kind of a buzzword, but the way that we saw co-creation was really this idea of embedded collaboration, not stakeholder management. So we really believe in, we're all one team and we're all developing this thing together. rather than we're going to work on something and then we're going to share it with the stakeholders over here, so when it's perfect and when it's polished, because actually getting your hands dirty in the work helps reveal things that we wouldn't otherwise have known. So one of the ways we did this was something called through something called example mapping, and that's really a practice um, that's from this concept of behavior-driven development. And really briefly, behavior-driven development, which we could dedicate an entire webinar to, is an agile software development approach that really emphasizes collaboration between all members of the team. So not just developers. So it's developers, testers, non-technical stakeholders, designers, to really define and test software behavior based on user expectations. So it really focuses on using a shared language. So, eliminating jargon, talking about the work in terms of how a user is going to use it, and describe and desired outcomes, versus, sort of focusing on the functional, how is this going to come together and be built. So again, we could do a whole webinar on this idea of behavior-driven development and example mapping, but essentially what it did was invite other people into the room as we're creating requirements for features. And it asks everyone to define what the tool needs to do from an end user's perspective. So for instance, what does this print feature need to do for, Amelia, who's an 82-year-old person in this county and really just needs to get resources on how to stay in her home. So again, not focusing on the output, but what what will this do for the people who are going to be using it. It really unlocks things when you're able to pull all those folks together, and then it creates shared ownership. So when Robbie and her team were just creating sticky notes and thinking about this at the very beginning of the development process, when they see it and it's all finished, they've been there that whole time. They've helped us think through, like, why are we building it this way? Why are we even building this at all? And could effectively sort of evaluate whether that build met the initial goals. So that's just one example of how we brought everybody together to co-create rather than sort of just have this passing over the fence experience. And maybe, Robbie, you could talk a little bit about the idea of how we saw working with you as more like coaching and knowledge sharing, knowing that you would ultimately be the manager of this technology when we weren't part of the project anymore.
Yeah, it was great to sit down with them and just kind of go through regarding what I needed to support this system without them. And so being able to have checklists and walkthroughs of this situation happens, X, Y, and Z, this is what you do. And it worked really, really well because, for example, we did have that situation happen. And I was able to walk through and quickly pull down a bad URL from our system until I could update and correct that. And so without having that being done ahead of time and that walkthrough and that mapping of that, I don't think that would have been able to happen.
Yeah, practical application of that after the fact. And I don't think we mentioned this earlier, but just to set additional context, the actual all of this feature set, all the work that we did actually went live in March of 2025. So we're about a couple months post launch. And so Robbie really has been able to come back and reflect on, the effectiveness of some of the ways that we work together. The last one we'll talk about related to sort of the team culture and human side of creating this experience is reflection. This is one that has a special place in my heart as an Agile coach. And it is a core part of the Agile practice. And that's that regular retrospective conversations, establishing that as a core practice is it really allows us all to take a breath, reflect on what happened over a certain increment of time, whether it be a 2-week sprint or a month, and make adjustments. it really helps us build trust. We're all willing to take a look at what we've done and pick it apart if it's not working, really stop doing the things that aren't serving us. And it's this idea, I think it supports the concept of go slow to go fast. So if we're able to really analyze, like, did that thing that we tried last week or the week before, did it pan out? Do we need a little longer to see if it's going to pan out? And if it's not working, let's do something else. This idea of just sticking to the plan and, regardless, is something that I think we all know in our hearts, I think, isn't always the most effective. And so luckily, Robbie and her team in this project were willing to deviate from that with us. They were willing to take a look at, well, maybe the thing that we have planned for this next sprint isn't the right thing. Maybe this functionality that we thought was going to be part of this really isn't useful for users, and let's do something else. And so doing that all together, being able to surface those tensions or questions before they start to fester, or you get 2 months down the road and you've already built the thing that actually isn't going to be useful anymore. It allows us to do that together. And again, it helps sustain trust. It builds shared ownership so that we're not making decisions outside of the broader group. And it just allows us to really reflect and do things better. It accelerates your ability to deliver. So reflection was that last bit that we used to really build this team culture. So I wanted to give one quick example. Hopefully we can start moving into like, well, how do you do this? Here's an example of, many of you may be familiar with retrospectives. If not, it's pretty simple. You spend time at the end of a certain period of work and you really look at things like what's ahead of us, what's pushing us along, what's been helping us this whole time, what obstacles are coming up. So collectively, right? Like Palantir may have known about some things coming up that Vader didn't know about. Vader might know some things within their organization that are going to be tough for us. Maybe there's a board meeting coming up and we need to share something out, like bringing all of these inputs from, what happened and what's coming up, really just helped us kind of stay aligned and be able to, I guess, plan for those things together. That is sort of the nutshell version of how we achieved personal experience success on this project. And the other half of this is the business side. It's great if you have a wonderful experience on a project, but if you don't have that other side, if you're not meeting objectives, if you're not able to really prove the value of your work, then the value of having a good experience might be diminished a little bit. So I think there's this misconception that if you're enjoying your work, if you are having a wonderful experience on a project and you can't wait to do it, a lot of times it's like, well, you're just having fun. There's no way that you can be working hard enough to meet those objectives because you're having too much fun. And on the other side, there's probably this misconception that if you're meeting your goals, that means your nose to the grindstone. You are like relentlessly pursuing these objectives, and there's just no time for fun and connection. And again, what we're trying to prove is like that's not true, because in this particular case, and in many cases, lots of research on this, that both can be true and both happened in this situation. So we're going to talk a little bit about the goal side, the success metrics side, the business side. It's a little bit, it's not easier, but it is something that's a little bit more straightforward. It's not a new concept. Writing or developing goals, figuring out how to meet those is a little bit more embedded into professional culture. But we're just going to go over briefly how we did this and how we achieved those outcomes, those measurable outcomes on this project. So how did we think about measurable goals or success metrics in this project? We thought about them as though they really don't change with the wind. There are signposts. There's signposts that are visible to everyone in the project, and how you achieve them can shift based on what you learn, but that they really are steadfast. And to turn it back to the people side, when you collectively know what you're trying to achieve and you talk about those a lot and you keep them steady, you'll trust your team and the process more. So what are good success metrics? What are some characteristics? Again, this is how we thought about them on the team. They're benchmarkable. I'm making up words here. That means that we know what the state was when we started. For instance, how long did it take an ABRC to get the information about a resource out into the public? Or how long did it take a particular user to find information about X? Or, how many phone calls do the individual ADRCs get on a daily basis? That's a current state that we can look at and say, this is the state now. Is this something we want to impact through our work? If yes, let's find out what the state is now and let's set a success metric for what we want to aim for. So they're benchmarkable. Also, everyone understands them. They repeat them. We talk about them regularly. They're not something that gets put on a shelf. We're making daily decisions based on them. All of us, the whole team. And finally, if we can prove that we've met them, then others outside of the project won't question our success. That's debatable, but you have a much better chance not being challenged on the success of a project if you set clear success metrics and you stick with them the whole time and you're able to sort of say, we did what we set out to do. So how did we approach success metrics on this project? Well, here they are. I won't go too deep into this, but part of our process at Palantir.net is creating what we call a North Star document at the beginning of a project. It's sort of a consolidation of business goals, user needs, and sort of an orienting story about what the client is trying to achieve with the work. We try to keep it very simple, readable, unarguable, undebatable. And I just want to call out that 2 years ago, when this project began, our visionary predecessors, so folks on the project before Robbie and I actually joined midstream, some of them I think are on this call. These visionary predecessors created these clear success metrics for us to validate against the whole project. So before we knew what we were building, they said, these are the things we want to be true when we're done with this project. So these are the metrics, and words may have changed here or there, but they were in place from the beginning of the project all the way through until launch and when we reported on whether we achieved them or not. So how did we use these? I'm going to take a breath. Actually, Robbie, do you have any, I guess, context or color commentary on how these were used on your side? Were these things that you talked about as a team outside of the project, and how did they kind of help your team orient?
Yeah, these are actually things that we talk about regularly and continuously use to look at and see how we're doing as we move forward with the project, since it is pretty new yet, building off of tools to use to see really where we're at. So for example, a survey sent to both partner agencies and customers to evaluate how was it at the beginning, and then we'll be re-looking at that later on to compare that. So we do regularly look at this and go back to that, like, is it accomplishing what we set out to do?
And I think if we can, I want to speed through what we did during the project a little bit and allow you some space to talk about how you've used them after the project or after the work has launched, because I think it's really exciting how you've been able to sort of adopt this framework and keep using it. So the first way that we incorporated these success metrics into our work involved incremental success checks. So, this concept of waiting until the very end to see if you're doing the right work or pursuing the right goals usually ends just as you expect, which is it's a crapshoot. If you really wait too long to understand if either we're hitting the goals that Robbie and her team are expecting, or whether we're hitting the goals or doing the things that the end user is expecting, it's a crapshoot. It's really you just don't know, and that's risky. That's a big risk, especially when you have a budget this large and you have a lot of visibility on this project. There's just no luxury to wait until the end to unleash it and see how it goes. So we did bi-weekly sprint reviews, which were, again, as I mentioned earlier, the times when Patrick shared out the weird national holidays. we shared the work that we had done in the previous 2 weeks as a team with Robbie, her team, other stakeholders at DHS. Super transparent. If things were not going as planned, if things were work in progress, we shared all of that. And we tied every bit of that work back to the project goals. So why were we doing that thing during that time? And how did it support and bring value to the thing that, or the goals that we were trying to achieve? Again, transparency if we didn't hit the mark. If we shared something and it didn't hit, or Robbie and her team remembered that in the example mapping session, that's not really how we said that was supposed to work. Why did you go this direction? It would give us an opportunity to talk about why we pivoted, or it would give us everyone a chance to hold ourselves accountable for maybe we deviated from that and we needed to readjust. Finally, it allowed for helpful communications for reporting out and up to stakeholders. Robbie, I'll let you talk a little bit more about this, but this idea of tying work directly to project goals and saying, what were our indicators that we're on track with these goals? How did this work support that? It really, when it boils right down to it, I'm hoping she agrees with me, but I think it gave Robbie a leg to stand on when we say we spent X amount of time and X amount of money over the last 2 weeks, and this is what it gets you directly to your supervisors, the other stakeholders, folks who are funding the project. So instead of you having to connect those dots yourself, what we tried to do collectively as a team is just continue to connect those dots and make the case. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say specifically about these incremental checks the whole time.
Yeah, I think just that they're great because it was an easy way for me to just pull out to be able to go through and, like you said, relay that information to leadership that's looking for where are we at, what's being done, are we meeting the goals that we set. So I didn't have to keep track of that myself, which was very helpful. It was able to be done for me.
And when you build it into the system and the process, everyone can focus less on that and more on the work and more about thinking about, what we're doing next. So we have a framework for this. I was going to share it as part of this conversation, but I think we're running a little low on time. So it's something that we can share back out, like redacted, maybe after this, on how we did that, how we reported on it and tracked it during the sprint reviews. So the next one on how to hold ourselves accountable, this is not something that everyone thinks they have the luxury to do, but validating with benchmarks, user research, and light metrics, it really is the way that you can kind of put a stake in the ground and say, yep, this is the right work, and the work is achieving what it needs to. So one of the ways we did this was to align quantitative data with the goals and benchmarking. We used Google Analytics to set up just some light behavioral metrics that basically told us whether site visitors can get the help they need, or that they can easily find the content on the site and know where they are. So we tied very specific quantitative metrics to that, and we benchmarked them, and we measure over time. I'll show you in just a moment. The other thing we did was we talked to real people. We spoke with folks in Wisconsin with disabilities who use these resources. We talked with folks who were caretakers of aging parents, and really tried to validate, like, are we giving you the resources that are useful to you? And we did it incrementally through the project. We had the luxury of being able to dedicate some people on the team to this, but there are lots of scrappy ways that this can happen. And this actually helped our team collectively remember why we're doing the work. So there was this one story that we love to tell about a usability test where one of our folks on our team sat down with a gentleman in Wisconsin and did some sort of light usability testing with him, where he looked at the site. And at the end, he said, I can't wait for this to go live. Please tell me when it's out in the world, because I will be, with my nose pressed against the window waiting for this. And that's like, that motivates the people on the team for weeks. You just have to remember that this man said this, that he's waiting for us to finish this so he can use it. And that's all it takes. So finally, the idea of setting up a lightweight framework to keep things going. I think this is kind of where we'll end this bit. But we created a framework for Robbie and others to sort of take each success metric toward the end of the project and very clearly know whether we're successful. So one of the indicators was this idea of average engagement time on the pages. We took a historical baseline of the site, the pages of the site prior to launch. We took a measurement of this in Google Analytics post-launch after 1 month, and then a month after that, and we have a delta. So this is a very simple way to just sort of say, hey, Robbie, every month, if you want to see how things are trending, here's your framework. Here's the success metric. Here's the indicator and the metric in Google Analytics you can look at, or the set of metrics, and you can share out with folks what that delta is. Another example that's not Google Analytics based necessarily is this idea of accessibility. It was a huge focus of the project. I'm sure you can imagine why. And some of our metrics were more about like enabling project work. So how much did we focus on accessibility testing? How many fixes did we make due to finding accessibility issues? And then finally, we did a pre-launch and post-launch audit of the site experience to better understand, like, have we moved the needle and gotten better? And then finally, our kind of indicator was looking at this audit, does the site meet the accessibility standard that the team wanted to meet? And then post-launch, how are we doing? Robbie looks at Site Improve regularly, which is a tool that allows to check for that, and just kind of maintains. If you have this as a metric, you're going to keep looking at it, and you're going to keep evaluating whether whether we're still successful. So I think we have some great metrics to share. We have some great quotes to share. But I think the other bit that I want to bring back around is, I know we've only got a few minutes left, is some metrics around the personal experience. We did a final project retro. And this was some of what the team said about their experience on the site. So if you're really thinking about measurement, it can be both the business outcome measurement, and it can be measurement and reflection on the individual and team experience. So things like working in a super supportive environment, etc. We're getting right up on time. Just one last, I guess, transition to how you might do this in your own work. There really is sort of a playbook for this. We went through the way that we did it, but if you boil it down, it's really about identifying your KPIs that map to outcomes. Check those things throughout the project, not using jargon so everyone understands. Celebrate, connect, and really treat the whole team as collaborators and as team success, the people success, as a thing to be focused on. So the final thought here, so sorry to run up right against time, but team psychological safety, the human success part of it, plus steadfast measurable goals, the business success part of it, really, if you focus on both of those, you really get the best kind of project success. It's about wanting to come back every day and do the work. So thank you for hanging this whole time. I don't know if there are any questions, but we can certainly follow up with some of the resources and tools that we talked about. Robbie, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share about this experience? I gave you like a fraction of a second to talk. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It was a great experience. Thanks for having me, Jill.
Wonderful. Well, I'm not seeing that there are any other questions that
There was one, Joe.
There was. Okay, got it. Thank
So
you.
yeah, so if we have time to do one,
Yeah.
there's a question here from Paul. How do you help teams maintain a shared consciousness without pushing information overload?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. Um, I think it goes back to the incremental nature of the work. So the idea of maintaining a shared consciousness, ooh, I mean, that's hard to do, but the more you check in, the more you see in little ways that, like, are we meeting this goal? Check in on that regularly. Do we understand what this goal means? How are we collectively doing as a group? Just those little bits, the little effort regularly contributes to that without information overload and without waiting so long that it's too late to check in on whether everybody's aligned. I would say that's my short answer. I don't know, Robbie, if you have any response to that question.
No, I think you kind of hit it on the head. It's just really that continuous check-in on how you're doing and that goal, right? So just continuously, if that's weekly, if it's, however often you're meeting, to making sure that you're all in the same space.
Thanks for surfacing that, Daniel. I hope this was validating or stimulating, and also I hope that it's inspiring that we can still have fun and enjoy our work and also nail our goals. I think that's not something that we focus on enough, and yeah, I would love to continue this conversation with anyone who wants to talk about it. Here's some information. We can also follow up with you, and thank you so much for joining us for this story today.